Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for what is this, Jen? Another Monday Matters. I can't even pronounce the words. It's so good to see you. And as we are stepping into the end of October, for those listening for the first time, Monday Matters are opportunities for Jen and I to just check in real time and talk about things that we're learning in our work with leaders. Our flagship show on Wednesday highlights a different guest each week. I've talked about, Jen, recently kind of our recording batches, and sometimes people may or may not care, but we have a lot of people that you and I are both interviewing. And so currently we have about 6 months of already recorded sessions with guests. And so it's really crazy. I was listening back to a wonderful conversation last week with a guest on the show. We recorded in August, and we're just now, listening to that conversation. So if you're listening to the show regularly, thank you. If you're hearing conversations that happened 6 months ago, that's why, because Jen and I are constantly batching, because we do more than just podcast. Podcasting is a part of what we do, but it's not all what we do, Jen. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in today's Monday Matters was kind of this, how do you, I'm going to call it Facing Shocktober, but I really just want to share a little bit of a story about what happens when the ordinary no longer feels extraordinary. And so before I do that, though, I can already see your wheels turning. How are you doing as you step into the end of the month?
Well, I want to tell you, we have a new listener.
Who's that?
My mother. My mom, I got her all set up with a new phone, and I was helping her with all of her apps and, all the things, pulling from the cloud, getting the passwords, getting all of that. And then she said, I want podcasts. And I said, Mom, why do you want podcasts? My mom's 80. And all of this is kind of overwhelming to her. And she said, well, I want to listen to you and Will. Oh. So I set her up, I favorited it, and now she can listen. So,
oh my goodness. Yeah. I feel so honored. It's funny that we're recording this session the day that, on my own mother's birthday, and of course my mother's passed, but this would have been her 85th.
Well, there you go. So this is the show for moms, and I just want to say hi to my mom. She's in her farmhouse in Shreve, Ohio right now, listening to us. So a new listener for Monday Matters. And so my mom thinks everything about my work is fascinating, and I think that's a great in for today's topic, because she has said to me before, do you know how fun your job is? There's no day that's the same. And she asks me for stories and gossip, and she'll say, tell me about that one lady that was so mad about that one thing. And I'll be like, Mom, that's just Tuesday. I don't know. So here we are.
Well, this is such a perfect segue because, we both grew up on farms, and I wanted to talk this week about just to tell a little bit of a story, but then for a reason. But a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak at an event in Little Rock, Arkansas with Apogee School CEO. They've sponsored our podcast in the past. And I was not too far from West Tennessee, so I drove over and spent a couple of days at the family farm. My brother now lives in the farmhouse that my mother and father raised us in. And it was just so fun to be back home, Jen. And just to get up in the mornings and take those long walks down the road and just be outdoors. But my brother asked me if I could help him mend some fences. So we put on our gloves and we drove the truck down into the bottom pasture, and a tree had come over a fence. And so it had probably been 20 years since I had mended a fence. And so he was showing me again, like, hey, don't forget how to do this, and here's how we stretch it and all this stuff. And then I was noticing that the more I did, the more he stepped back to let me do, because I think he was enjoying watching me work. But later I was thinking about that when I was back home, because I was on a call. I'd spent the day doing what I do, coaching leaders, leading training, and it was late afternoon, and I was on a call with a leader who was sharing with me an upcoming book that he's working on. And it's so weird, Jen, because right in the middle of the conversation, I found myself so antsy to get off, like to just end this conversation and be done. And it was really weird, because there's nothing more amazing than being able to sit across from extraordinary leaders and have conversations and do this wonderful work. But later I was kind of scratching my head, like, why was I, what is what is this emotion? And so I was actually the next day talking to a friend of mine where we share some coaching, and my son Jack, I didn't realize, was overhearing the conversation. So later he came to me and was like, "Hey, Dad, I heard you talking about how you're starting to feel a little bit bored. It sounds like with your work, or maybe it's not as exciting as it was before." And he's like, and you know how kids are. They're just, I mean, he's 20, so he's not really a kid, but he just was like, he's like, "I don't always enjoy my college classes, but right now that's my job." And what it just sounded to me like maybe you need a reminder that sometimes jobs require work, and work's not always fun. And at that moment, I just remember kind of having the aha of, oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes what was once the extraordinary becomes very ordinary. And
Right.
so, Jen, I just wanted to set on that tension because you and I work with a lot of leaders, and how do you step forward when you're starting to feel like what you're doing may not be as engaging or exciting or fulfilling, all
Right.
those feelings that we have when we're involved in something that's still so important.
Right. Well, I think about this a lot because I think there's stages that happen in your professional life when you're bored. I don't love that word because it implies a petulant child saying to her mother, I'm bored. I think it's that feeling of restlessness, like, okay, I've done this, I know how it's going to end. And then I think if you don't do something about that boredom, then it can perpetuate and turn into apathy. So I think about, way back when I was a server or a bartender, I remember days being like, same thing. And I needed to change it up. I needed to take different shifts, or I needed to learn a new skill or whatever. And then I remember when I was teaching, I remember the moment where I thought, if I have to stand up here and teach about a semicolon one more time, I might have a breakdown. That means I let it go too far. I think I needed to acknowledge the boredom before it got to that point, before I got angry and apathetic. And so I think that, when you feel that sense of boredom, yes, it's work. 100% it's work, and you just have to muscle through it. But also, I wonder if, like you just said earlier, revisiting the magic and the beauty of it and the impact of it. You even said, I get to sit across from extraordinary leaders
Yeah.
and talk to them.
Yeah.
So those reminders, I think, are very helpful. I use those in my job on hard days. I'm like, now let's remember all the fantastic
Yeah.
before we go down the road of frustration.
Well, part of, I think, the thought process I was going through when I was thinking about, mending fences with my brother, because I was having so much fun. I told him later, like, that was the favorite part of my whole time back home. We did all kinds of
Right.
stuff. And he laughed because that's just that's what he does all the time. And it made me remember a conversation I had with my great aunt was a farmer's wife, and she and her husband and my grandparents farmed the same property for years and years. And I remember probably maybe college being up with her at her property and looking out across the beautiful fields and the roads and her flowers. And I said something like, "Oh, it's just so beautiful here, isn't it?" And she looked at me with one of those wise expressions and she said, "Yes, and it's a lot of hard work to keep it." And so, you know, so
Right.
sometimes, I there's so many directions to go with this conversation, Jen. But so first, I just want to be I'm going to just be a little introspective out loud. But because people reach out to you and me, and they'll ask us about their work and staying connected to their purpose, but what's next for them. And, I'm so grateful for this work. This 2026 will mark 10 years since I started the podcasting part of this work. So for context, I was doing a little math. That's like 520 weeks of content created over the last 10 years. We've released 488 shows since then. We've talked to hundreds of leaders. And since you've helped me start doing interviews together, we can bank interviews so far in advance because of how many people you and I are just talking to learn and learn and learn. And at the same time, what is an extraordinary opportunity can become commonplace. And so we have to also find time to reconnect with things that bring us joy and bring us perspective. So I just want to say a couple of things to leaders. One is that you may be involved in work that is extraordinary, but it feels very ordinary to you. And so just a reminder that your good leadership is often just built on those consistent behind the scenes actions that are actually making a long-term impact, but they start feeling ordinary to you.
Right.
The second thing I want to say is that repetition doesn't mean irrelevance. That
Yes, right.
what may seem routine to you can actually be really meaningful for the care and the support necessary to lead and serve other people.
Right.
Just like that beautiful farm that my aunt worked on every single day. And then I will say this, I think it's important though for us to step away sometimes from the routines to reconnect with our why. And so I'll often ask leaders, what are the actions that you're doing that keep you connected to the most meaningful outcomes of your work? Because sometimes you need to get out and reconnect with those kids and those families and those faces. And so let me just stop there, Jen, because I'm sure you have some thoughts on that too.
Well, yeah, and I've talked about this before. When you, as principals, when you get in that place of ugh, I don't know if there's a better word than that. It always helped me to remember how many people would love my job. They would want it. They would want to apply for it. They'd want to win it, and they'd want to do it. And so there is, a privilege to that, and it helps to remember that you were chosen to do this work by whatever means choice happened in your path. And also, this is so cliche, but I'm going to say it because it's so true. I was feeling this way last week. It had been a bad week, and I got my sneakers on, and I went on a tour, and I went into classrooms, and I talked to kids, and I talked to staff members. And here's the thing, I didn't want to. I was tired, and it seemed like an inauthentic way to make myself feel better. It felt selfish. And then I did it. And it was like a balloon filling up with air. I positively, floated through the rest of the day. And it's just another reminder. I know it, but I needed to just force myself to do it. It's a reminder that when you get back to the roots, boy, you feel better almost instantly.
Yeah. Next week, it's so funny because I didn't even think about this till you said it, but I'm scheduled to go walk a building with a friend of mine here in the Tulsa area at a high school who just reached out to me over the weekend and just had some questions. And I was like, let's just have this conversation face to face.
Right.
But part of that reason is for this reason too, Jen, because so often when you and I are supporting the work of leaders, if we're not getting out and being with them,
right,
we lose that freshness too. But even when I talk to leaders, I was interviewing a guest who's going to be on the show here in a few months last week, and he's been doing work in the same school for about 14 years. And I asked him the same question, and he said, "I never miss a lunch, Will. That's where I get my joy every day,
right,
being out there connecting with kids." So, as we wrap up, I'll just say a couple of other things too, Jen, and that is that, like it or not, discipline is the necessary ingredient for sustaining what inspiration begins. And so sometimes what may also seem hard doesn't mean we need to abandon it. So just like when I get out in the morning for a jog and I'm like, why am I still doing this at 56 years old? I just wish I could just sit with my cup of coffee on my back porch all morning long. But once I've embraced the discipline, I feel so much better for the rest of the day. And I'm so glad that I'm engaging in things that are keeping me healthy. And then the last thing I'll say is that we've already touched on this. I just think it's so important that we balance the novelty with commonplace because we need to stay fresh. Kids can tell it when we're not. Teachers can tell it when we're not. And so there's a rhythm, I think, between the two.
Right. And one more thought about that.
Yeah.
If you're feeling like you're stumbling, go watch a colleague like Will's about to do. The schools I visited, it was so cool. My colleague Melissa, she was talking to a kid, "Hey, whatever happened with that skateboard?" And then another colleague, Josh, he knows his kids so well. He can ask them, "Hey, is your aunt going to host Thanksgiving again this year?" It's amazing. It's amazing, those connections with kids. So watch an expert at work, and that might just shake you out of your malaise.
Well, leaders, as you're listening to this, I just want to say, earlier this week, a principal I was working with says she likes to call this time of the year Shocktober.
Yeah.
That when she steps into October, she realizes, like, oh my gosh, how much work we still have to do to shape these kids and to support these teachers, and the honeymoon's over. And so I think for all of us, this is that time of the year where we just need to take a step back and remember that we don't always have the chance every day to go out and mend some fences in literal ways that can just kind of reconnect us with the joy that we once experienced. But we can figuratively, you're mending fences every day. And
That's
so
right.
sometimes there's a way to do that that keeps you connected to your why. Whether that's getting out in the mornings and watching those kids practicing in the band fields, or
Right.
walking through your practices, or being out there at recess, Jen, and recording the sounds of those kids laughing and having fun. But leaders, as you're stepping to this week, I just want to encourage you to just remember that your extraordinary work also involves the ordinary, that repetition doesn't mean irrelevance. You can seek those fresh perspectives by reconnecting with your purpose. And it's okay sometimes
Yeah, that's right.
it's okay to feel tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And bored.
Yeah, it's okay. That's just part of, that's, as my son would say, it sounds like you're doing a good job. So I don't know if that was inspiring, but it certainly was something that I hope was helpful. So Jen, as we wrap up, I know a place where I've been inspired lately, and that's with your newsletter. So tell people how they can connect with that.
Yes, they can find me. Just go to my website at jenschwanke.com, and there's a link to subscribe, and you'll get a newsletter every Tuesday morning.
And you can always connect with these resources at williamdparker.com, where we send out heads up every Wednesday with our weekly show. And of course, we have our Monday Matters. And if you haven't gone over lately to whatever podcast app you use to leave a rating or review, please do that, because that helps the show be shared out with others. So until next time, thanks for doing what matters.
Thanks, everyone.